about containers. I know all of you are using containers. I'm using containers. Everyone's using containers, but we've got a whole new set of features that's going to help you use containers more securely, more efficiently, more effectively, help you set up all of your deployments. It's going to be rad. I have Suchika Singh here with me today. She's going to be going over all of the cool new stuff inside of CF25 beta, which is available right now for testing. If you're not doing it, what are you doing with your life? Go down, click the beta sign up, but don't do it yet because right now, Suchika Singh is going to talk about all the cool new stuff. Suchika, over to you.
Thanks a lot, Mark. So let's start. Hello, good morning. Namaste, everyone. I am Suchika Singh. A lot of you must have heard from me in the India or the Vegas Summit speaking on language scheduler and also Docker as well. For others, I work for Adobe and I've been part of the Cold Fusion family for about 10 years now. Right, so let's quickly start on the today's presentation. So I'm today presenting on what's new in the Cold Fusion Docker image. Right, so let's look at today's agenda. So we'll start with an introduction on what is Docker. So it could be a recap for, I think, most of you. For others who are new to the Docker world, this could be an introduction and a starting point for all of you guys. Then we'll look at the Docker architecture. So, a brief look on what the Docker architecture is, a typical Docker workflow. So, just to give you a background and get started on Docker and container world. And then post that, we'll see the Cold Fusion Docker image that we shipped for you. So, how that is being built and that is being shipped to you guys. So, we'll see a quick look on that, and then we'll have a small demo which would help you to understand the Docker image that we ship for you. Post that, we'll start with the new features. So we are bringing in some of the Swarm features with the Cold Fusion CF Next beta. So we'll talk about Docker secrets and how they are created and how can it be used in the Cold Fusion Docker image. Right, so post that, we'll have two demos for which will be using these Docker secrets. And then we have Docker configs, which is also used to store some of the non-sensitive data that you have in your application. So after we'll see how these are being created and how these can be used with the Cold Fusion Docker image. And then we'll see some of the demos with the Docker configs. Then we also have CCS image, Docker image available for you guys. So we'll see how that is being created, and then quickly a demo with the CCS image. Right, so this is today's agenda, and then we'll quickly start with the presentation. Now, what is Docker? Right, so Docker is basically a platform which is used to build, run, and ship applications consistently. Now, when I say consistently, I mean that the application is whatever is running in your environment should basically run in all the environments, in your client's environment, in your production machine, basically everywhere. Right, so on all our years of software development, we have seen that there have been many instances where we say that it is working on my machine but it has never worked in your production machine. Right, so why does this happen, and how can we resolve that? Right, so this would happen because maybe in your environment you had some files which is missing in your production machine, or there's a software version mismatch. So if you're running your application on Cold Fusion 2023, which had some of the advanced features, but in your production environment, you are still on Cold Fusion 2021, and those features will obviously not work on 2021. So there's a software version mismatch. There might be a JRE version mismatch, and so on. There could be different configuration settings. So there were certain mappings that were done in your machine, certain environment variables which were set in your machine, but on the production machine you basically forgot to set those. Right, so because of that, the application is not running on the production environment. Now, to resolve all of these, and for the application to run consistently on all your environments, Docker was born. Right, so Docker, what it does is it's basically packages your application with all its dependencies. So basically, whatever your application needs, if it needs a MongoDB server, if it needs a MySQL connector, all of that is packaged along with your application code, and that is packaged into an image, and that can run anywhere, right? So what happens is that because of this packaged application, it basically runs in all the environments. It would run on your development environment, stage, production, any environment. And if there's a new person that's joining your team, it becomes very simple for that person to set up your application. Where it would take days to set up all the dependencies of the application, it becomes very simple in the Docker environment. You just have to pull that image and just start up your spin up your application using simple commands like docker compose up, right? When you bring up your application, it comes up in an isolated environment where our application is running, and that environment is known as a container. So when you package your application, that is known as an image, and you can pull that image and start your your application, and that environment where our application is running is what is a container, right? So I hope you are familiar with the terms like images, containers. So this is the difference between a Docker image and a Docker container, right? With When you have Docker containers running in your system, you can have multiple versions of the same application running simultaneously, which can help you to check what performance, how you're getting the performance of the application on different versions, and becomes very easy for anyone to run different versions of the same application in on the same machine if they're using Docker containers. Now, if you want to bring down your application or and clean up it, that is also very simple and easy. You just have to write few commands like docker compose down, and your application is down. You don't have to delete any mappings, your uninstall servers. All of these is becomes very easy with Docker. You just have to write a command docker compose down, and your application is down, and all the cleanup happens, right? So these are some of the advantages with Docker. Let's quickly look at the Docker architecture. So a typical Docker architecture consists of three elements. So we have a client, which is basically the Docker CLI, and where you could write all your Docker commands like Docker pull, push, build, run, all of that. And then there's a Docker host, which has the Docker daemon server or the Docker engine running, and it also has the containers, which has all your apps running, and then the Docker image, right? So all of this are part of the Docker host. And then you have a registry is basically to host your images, and that and also to distribute your images so that it is available to basically your clients or your customers, or you can also have your images publicly available. So if you want to have your images publicly available, you can push your images to Docker Hub or AWS ECR, and so on, right? So this is how the Docker architecture looks like. Now, then we'll quickly look at a typical Docker workflow, right? So you obviously start with a Docker file, which has the instructions of how your application would be running inside a container. So it copies all your files, runs some of your scripts, and then installs your server, and so on. All those instructions will be part of this Docker file. And then once you have written your Docker file, you would build that Docker file into an image. And then once you have that image, you would want to test your application. So you would basically do a Docker run, and then you would have a container up and running, which would have your application running. So once you're verified that your application is working fine and everything is perfectly all right, you would want to push that image and distribute that image to your customers, and you would and your clients. So you would push that image to a registry or a hub. So that registry could be either private and it is only privately available to your customers, or it could be publicly available for everyone, right? So once you've pushed your image using the Docker push command to these registries, your customers would be able to pull those images using the Docker pull command and have it in their local environment, right? So use a Docker build to build your Docker file into an image. Then you use a Docker run to build your to run your image as a container. And once your container is tested and verified, you would push that image to the registry, and from that registry your customers would be able to pull that image, right? So this is basically all the Docker commands that are supported, and this is a typical Docker workflow. Okay, now that I've set the basics of Docker, let's get into the Cold Fusion Docker image. Uh, right. So, what is it that takes to build the Docker image that we ship for you? So, the Docker image that we have consists of, for building the Docker image, we need a Docker file. So basically, Docker file would have all the instructions to build that Cold Fusion Docker image. We'll see that Docker file quickly, but we'll start with that Docker file, and then we have a installer properties file, which is used to silently install in the Cold Fusion, and also to install any updates on top of that Cold Fusion base server. So you'll have these in silent installer properties file. Then we have a startup script file. So this startup script file is basically used to configure your Cold Fusion server with all the settings that we make it available for you guys, right? So once the image is ready, you would have a push script. We have a push script which would basically push that image to Docker Hub and AWS ECR. Let's quickly look at what the Docker file is used to build the Cold Fusion Docker image. So we use a base image, which is basically the latest Ubuntu image that is available as the base image for your Cold Fusion image. Currently, we have only shipped the Linux image, but we will be soon shipping a Windows image as well for you guys. So the base image is only Ubuntu right now, and then we use a zip installer. So earlier, till Cold Fusion 2021, we only had the GUI installer, which was a full blown installer and had all the modules shipped with the Cold Fusion. But with the zip installer, we only have a core set of modules installed, pre-installed with Cold Fusion. So we use zip installer so that the size of the Docker image is also small, and then give the capability to all you guys to install any module that your application is using while bringing up the container. So we use a zip installer in the Docker file, and then we unzip that zip installer. We run cf install on to the Cold Fusion zip installer. So that cf install sets the runtime user, password, and so on of the Cold Fusion installation. After cf install is run, we apply some of the latest updates. Whatever is the latest update available for Cold Fusion, we apply that, and then we copy certain scripts like the startup script and other scripts that are required to set the settings of your Cold Fusion server, and then finally we define the startup script, which is used to actually run those settings. Right, so this is how your Docker file looks for the Cold Fusion Docker image that we built. uh, then we have the Cold Fusion. Then let's quickly look at the environment variables that we support with the Cold Fusion Docker image. Right, so the first environment variable is accept EULA, which is basically the environment variable which is a required one. So this you definitely have to define when you're bringing up your Cold Fusion Docker image. And then others, whatever environment variables are available, are all optional environment variables, right? So we'll quickly look at what all environment variables are available. So we have password, which is basically used to set the Cold Fusion administrator password. We then have enable secure profile, which is used to set enable or disable the secure profile of your Cold Fusion server. Then you could define your external session storage, which in our case we support Redis. So you could define the Redis host port password using these environment variables. Uh, then we have you can configure your add-on server using these environment variables. So we have variables to define your host port, the username, password, pdfg service name, all of those using these environment variables. Then we have an environment variable which is setup script. So basically, this is the CFM file that would be invoked once your CF server is up. So this setup script should be present inside the slash app directory. So for your Cold Fusion container that the Cold Fusion Docker image that we ship, the web root is the slash app directory. So you should mount that slash app directory to your local file system, and this setup script file should be present in that file directory. Right, so you could choose to delete that setup script file once it has been executed. So if you choose true, it will be deleted. If you choose false, it will not be deleted. uh, so we support two locales along with the Cold Fusion server. So it is Japanese and English both. So by default it is English, but you could specify Japanese. uh, then we have install modules. So as I was specifying earlier, that the zip installer only has the core modules installed, pre-installed with the Cold Fusion server. So if your application needs any of the other modules, you could define what modules have to be installed while the container is coming up using this environment variable install modules. Then we have import CF settings. So we have a excellent tool available with Cold Fusion, which is CF setup. And using CF setup, you could export settings of a particular CF instance and use that. It exports into a JSON file, and that JSON file could be used to import that settings to any number of CF instances. So you that JSON file could be specified here using the import CF settings environment variable. And again, this file, JSON file, should be present inside the web root, which is the slash app directory for the Cold Fusion container. Some of the settings are sensitive and they're encrypted. So, in order to decrypt those settings, we need a passphrase, and that can be defined using this environment variable. We have one last environment variable which was available earlier as well, which is import modules. And that basically defines all those modules that needs to be imported in your Cold Fusion instance. Right, so these were available earlier as well. Let's look at some of the environment variables that have been either modified with this new release or have been newly introduced. Right, so we'll start with deployment type. So this was available in the earlier release as well, but we were not accepting numeric values earlier. But now we are accepting numeric values. So it could have 5 values, and by default, the value is 1, which corresponds to production deployment type. Right, then we have profile. Again, this was available earlier as well, but earlier we were not accepting numeric values. Now we are accepting numeric values, and by default, the value is 3, which corresponds to development profile. Then we have allowed admin IP list. This was available as well before, but with the recent Cold Fusion, you can set this allowed admin IP list for all the 3 profiles. Earlier, it was only available for production secure profile. Then we have a CF secret path. So basically, this tells you where you are storing your Docker secrets. We'll look at it later in the next set of slides. Then we again have CF config path, which would tell you where your Docker configs are stored. Uh, then we have CCS nodes and start CCS. So we'll look at all these environment variables later in my slides. Okay. So let's quickly look at a small demo. So we have in this demo we have an application which is a probe application written to check if the tracker is up and running or not. Then we are copying a MySQL connector so that we can create a MySQL data source. The startup script that we define would basically create that MySQL data source. Then we have a Docker file which defines all of these, then a Docker compose file, environment variables to define all those settings that needs to be set, and then along with that we have the cf setup export json file which would be used to import the cf setup settings. Along with that, so by default docker, whenever the docker container comes up, the logs are written to the docker daemon logs, but you could also specify another logging drivers. There are multiple logging drivers that are supported with docker. So here I'm basically using Splunk. So this is the command to bring up your Splunk server. So let's quickly look at the demo. So I hope my screen is visible. I'll go to the demo one folder. So I've already brought up my Splunk server. So I'll just show you my Splunk admin. So if I go here, this is my Splunk admin. So I need to define a Splunk HTTP collector, which would basically get the logs from the CF server into the Splunk server. So to define your Splunk HTTP collector, you just need to go to the data inputs, and inside that you need to define a HTTP event collector. I've already defined one. So this is the token value here, and this is what I'll be using in my Docker Compose file. So let's look at the Docker Compose file. So let me do a cat docker compose YML. So if you see, this is the service that I'm defining. So my service name is Cold Fusion, and it is built using this Docker file, which is inside this slash app directory. So we'll see this Docker file after we go through this Docker compose. We are exposing 8500 port to 8500. We are mapping in the local host as well. We are defining volumes. So the slash app directory, which is basically the web root of your Cold Fusion container, is mapped to this directory, which is a directory inside this demo one. And then we are defining all the environment variables for this Docker container inside this file variables.env. Yeah, and then we are here defining the logging driver. So as I told you, the Splunk token, whatever is available here is what I'm using. So this is my Splunk token. That is what I'm using in my Docker Compose file, and this is where the HTTP event collector runs on. So 8088 port, it's running on that. So I'll just bring up. Let's look at the Docker file as well. So I'll go to cd app and then check the Docker file. So it's a very small Docker file. The base image is CFNext beta latest. So you can see that we have already pushed the CFNext beta latest to Docker Hub, and it's available there. So that is my base image. I'm just copying the MySQL connector to this cfusion lib, and then I'm copying my application, which is available inside this, to slash app directory. My application is I'll not get into details of the application, but it's basically a probe written to check whether your tracker application is up or not. So I'll just show you. Let me clear my screen and then yeah. Sorry. Yeah. So this application basically checks if your tracker application is up and not, and if it is not, it sends an email to email if that the tracker application is down. So tracker is basically your portal where you could log bugs if you encounter any bugs in Cold Fusion 2023 or earlier. For any bugs that you are seeing in CF Next beta, log it through the pre-release forum. Uh, and if you have not signed up to the pre-release, I'm sure Mark will send out links to sign up to the pre-release program. Right. So this base app, this is what the application does. We'll quickly look at the variables.env file. So yeah, so accept EULA as yes, this is the required environment variable. So you definitely have to define this for bringing up any Cold Fusion container. So we've defined that. We've defined the password, which is stored in, just to let you know, it's stored in plain text. So password Cold Fusion 123, and then we are defining the startup script. We'll look at the startup script as well. And then we're defining that we have to install these modules, and we have to import the settings using this file. And this settings JSON file needs a passphrase, which is, this is the passphrase for that JSON file. Okay. So as I told you that these should be available inside the slash app directory, and we had seen in that Docker compose file that the slash app directory is mounted to my web root. Right. So the setup script and both the the JSON file should be available inside your my web root directory. So if I go cd my web root, it should have both the files. So it has this JSON file, and it also has the setup startup script file. So if I see the setup Cold Fusion CFM file, so it basically is using admin API, and it goes and creates a data source, which is a MySQL type. Okay, so that is what my application is doing. So let's clear everything and bring up my application. Yeah, so while it's bringing up, we'll quickly look at the rest of my presentation, right? Okay, so moving on. So we'll move to the new features that are available with CF Next Beta. So you can store your sensitive information in Docker secrets, and how these are used with Cold Fusion images, we'll see that. Now, what are Docker secrets? It is basically a way to manage your sensitive data in a Docker environment. So by sensitive data, I mean passwords, API keys, certificates, and all of those, right? So your database passwords, all of those could be stored in a sensitive way using in a secure way using Docker secrets. Right. So why do you need to use Docker secrets? So that you do not hard code the sensitive data in environment variables. So any container that comes up, you can just do a Docker inspect on that container, and then you can see all the environment variables that is available inside the container. So even for this container, I'll just I'll start it in a daemon mode so that I can show you the Docker inspect command. Yep. So I'll just do a Docker ps, and this is coming up, right? So if I do this is my container that's coming up. So if I just do a let me clear my screen. I do a Docker inspect of the container that just came up. You can see all of the details of the containers. So inside that, you can see all your environment variables. So all the passwords, everything is stored in plain text, and this could lead to data leaks and unauthorized access. So in order to avoid all of these, we should use Docker secrets. One of the disadvantages of Docker secret is that it is only available in Docker swarm mode and not in the standalone mode. Now, how can you create Docker secrets? You can create a Docker secret using this Docker secret create command. So you can use this to create your Docker secrets, and also you can define them while you're defining your Docker service. So you can say Docker service create and then use a minus minus secret flag to define your Docker secrets, or you could define them in your Docker compose file. So we'll see all of these in my demos, which is following. And then how are these Docker secrets stored in a swarm? So whenever you create a Docker secret, they are encrypted and then they are stored inside a Docker swarm. Uh, so this encrypted secret is basically stored in the swarm's raft log, and that is replicated among all the manager nodes. Now, what is a swarm's raft log? So raft log is basically the you know Raflog is basically the is an architecture that Docker Swarm follows to replicate all your information among all the worker nodes, and to ensure that there is consistency in your Docker Swarm environment, right? So basically, for that Docker Swarm uses a Raft algorithm, and that secret is stored in that Raft log, and that is replicated using your manager nodes. So the manager nodes has that secret, and that manager nodes handles the secret distribution. So whatever whenever a service is coming up which requires that secret, the manager node identifies that worker node, and it distributes that secret to that worker node in an encrypted the transit is also the secret transit is also encrypted, and inside the worker node, when it is stored in the in memory of the worker node, it's never stored in the disk of the worker node, right? So you can inside, and if you have to access that secret inside a container, it is available inside the container as a file, and which is available inside slash run slash secrets folder, and the name of the secret. You can also choose to define the secret in another location as well. So if you want to define your secrets in any other location, that can be defined in the Docker compose file. Now, in the context of cold fusion image, what all sensitive data can be stored in secrets? So we can store the cold fusion admin password, add-ons passwords. So when you are configuring your external add-ons server, you can store the password of your add-ons server in Docker secrets. Similarly, when you are configuring external session storage server, that is your Redis, with CF, you can store that password as well in the Docker secrets. Right, so by default, all your secrets are stored inside slash run slash secrets folder. Inside the container, they're available in that folder, as I had mentioned earlier, but that is configurable. And for your cold fusion container to read from a different path than the default path, we use a environment variable which is cf secret path to define. So suppose your secrets are stored inside slash opt slash secrets, so you define that path in this environment variable. Right, so let's quickly look at this demo. We Some of the commands that we'll be using is to initialize a swarm. So to initialize a swarm, we'll just use Docker swarm init, and to define your password. So the Cold Fusion password is stored in this secret, which is the name password. So to define that, we'll use this Docker secret create command, and then to bring up your application in the swarm mode, we'll use the Docker stack command. We look at it. We have few files that will be associated with this demo, Docker compose file and variables.env file. So we'll look at all of these in the next demo. So let's quickly look at that. So before we get into the next demo, let's quickly go back to the demo one. So in demo one, the CF server should be up and running now. So we'll go to uh, the Splunk server to check all the logs of the CF server. So we just say index equal to star, and then source is CF demo 1. Yeah. So I think CF has already started because it said module started. Right. So we'll look at the Cold Fusion server. So password was Cold Fusion 123. We logged in. It should have so the CF setup import settings JSON file had settings related to mail and schedule tasks. So it should have actually gone and installed that. It has not installed it. Let's check why. Okay, so we'll just check the logs of the container. Okay. Okay. It should have installed. Okay. I'm not sure why the modules were not installed, but according to the logs, it looks like the modules was installed and it was actually working some time back. I'm not sure why it's not working right now. Okay. Fine, I'll just look at it why it's not working, but I think it was working some time back. Okay, so we look at uh, the second demo. Okay. So for the second demo, these we are looking at a demo with Docker secrets. So we'll just see what the compose file looks like. So we just say docker compose yml and see the file. So the image that we're using here is CF next beta, and we are exposing the CF port as 8501. So when the container comes up, it should be available on this port. We have some of the environment variables defined for this. So it's defined inside this file, and then we are mounting the /app directory to this. So the web root in your local file system is mapped to this directory, and then we are defining. So this is how we define a secret. So secret is defined. The secret that will be part of this service is password. So name of the secret is password, and the target path inside the container is /run/secrets and the name of the secret. So it is basically getting stored in the default path only, right? And the source of the secret, we are seeing external true. So that means that it has already been created. So if I just do, or I have already created the docker secret. So
Hey, everybody. we seem to have lost Suchika. I'm wondering if her machine was showing that she had low battery. I'm wondering if her laptop may have died. So let's give her a second to come back in. I thought Macs don't need batteries. Thought they just run on nuclear power. It does, Charlie. Yeah. I mean, one of the reasons I'm looking to get a Mac is just not having to constantly have my machine plugged in. There she
I'm so
is.
sorry.
Did you lose power, Suchika?
Yes.
Okay.
I-
I saw that. I was so anxious. I saw the little thing saying it's gonna die. I'm like, oh my God, did she see that?
Yeah, I saw that too, and I thought it'll survive the whole presentation, and then it didn't actually. So,
Okay.
okay.
Okay. I'll let you reshare and continue.
Yeah, just ran to get the charger. Okay.
All good.
So
All
sorry.
good. Okay.
Yeah.
I'll jump back out.
Okay. I'm not very sure what was the last that uh, we were at. Okay. So I just started Docker Secrets demo that we were looking at, right? Just 1 second. I'll just stop sharing. So sorry. By that time it connects to that machine. Are there any questions?
I think Charlie had mentioned a little bit about whether you would want to do an example with using the Docker Hub image versus doing the tar, since we have both. I'm not sure if
Yeah.
you're set up for that or not. And if you are and want to do it, it might be interesting for folks to, because that's a more common
Right.
pattern, right?
Yeah. So I think in the first demo that I had, I was using the Docker Hub image. So in the Docker file, I think I did show that I was using the Docker Hub image. So if you could see my screen, so
Yeah,
I'm using Adobe Cold Fusion CF Next Beta latest, which is the CF Next Beta image that we
awesome.
posted in Docker Hub.
Perfect, perfect. Awesome. Thank you. Okay, I'm going to pop back off and let you keep going.
Yeah. Okay, so we're looking at the second demo with Docker secrets, right? So we look at the Docker compose file. I'm not sure where my screen had frozen, so we'll just start with that. So the important thing in this file is about secrets. So the secret here is password. So that's the name of the secret, and by default it is stored inside the /run/secrets path, and the name of the file would be the name of your secret, so it's password here. And you see that the secret is defined as external true. That means that I've already created the secret, either using the docker service command or using the docker secret create command. So if I just do a docker secret ls, it would show me that I'd already created this secret password, and it doesn't show the content of the secret in it's encrypted and stored, so you can see that the value of the secret is encrypted. And we'll quickly look at the variables.env file. So the variables.env file has just one parameter, which is accept EULA equal to yes. And you could choose to define your CF secret path as well. So if you're storing your secrets in a non-default location, you can define that here using this environment variable CF secret path, which to any path where you want to store it inside the container. Right. So my swarm is already up, so I don't need to run that docker swarm init command. I'll just run the docker stack deploy command, which is used to bring up your application in a swarm environment. So I'll just say docker stack deploy -c and define the compose.yml file, which is inside the same directory. So I just say docker compose yml, and then I say cf app with my secret. So I bring that, and then it would bring up, okay, it's already being used. So let me just change the port to something else. Okay. Yeah. So my swarm should have this service now. So if I do docker service ls, it has brought up these services. Okay, there are others as well, but the one that I brought just now, this is the one which has this 8601 port. So this is come up, it's bringing up the CF container. So if I do a docker ps, this should be the one that just came up. So up 27 seconds ago. So if I say the value of my docker secret was Adobe 234. So if I just do docker, sorry, I forgot the container ID. So docker logs 4c7. So yeah. So in the logs, you can see updating password. So I had not defined the password in the variables.env file. And even then it's changing the CF password. So basically it's picking up the password from Docker secrets. So if I go and check, so I think CF has already come up. So it's running on 8601 port. And I log in and I'm using Adobe @234 as my password, and it logs in. Right. So I think so the CF took the password from Docker secrets. Right. So this was about Docker secrets. Now we are using the secret feature from Docker Swarm, but there are a lot of external secret management system available in the market. And when should you use them, right? So if you have a complex application which has a lot of services and a lot of clusters defined in multiple orchestration platforms, like some of them are in Kubernetes, some are on Nomad, etc. In those scenarios, you should be using an external secret management system. If you need a dynamic secret rotation, so if you're creating a secret in Docker Swarm, these are immutable. If you need a dynamic rotation of these secrets, you can use some of these external tools. If you need a centralized management system, you can use these. If you have your application set up in multiple regions across the world and on multiple cloud environments, then you could use one of these secret management system. Some of the popular secret managers are HashiCorp Vault, AWS Secrets Manager, Azure Key Vault, and some others are available on Google Cloud as well. I'll show you an example of how we can use AWS Secrets Manager along with a Cold Fusion Docker image. So let's quickly go at look at that demo. So we have a for this demo we have a Docker Compose file, and then we'll go to the AWS console and see how can we create secrets there. And then with your Docker image, how can you configure your AWS credentials, and finally a password script file which is used to change the password of your Cold Fusion admin. Okay, so first we'll go to the AWS console and see how you can create secrets there. So I this is my AWS console. So you can go to AWS Secrets Manager and basically just click on store a new secret and just define some of the values here and create your secret manager. It's quite simple. I've already created one, and the name of the secret is again password. I created, I think, just few hours back. So we'll see how we can use this AWS secret manager with the Cold Fusion Docker image. So I'll go to demo3 folder and then check the Docker Compose file. So the Docker Compose file has it's being built from this Docker file, which is inside this app directory. So we'll see this Docker file, and then I'm exposing the 8500 to 8502. So on my host machine, the Cold Fusion server will be coming up on 8502, and then defining the slash app directory of your Cold Fusion container, mounting that directory to my web root, which is inside this directory. And then so since I've already logged into this AWS account in my local system, and the credentials of that AWS account will be stored inside this directory. So whenever you do a AWS configure, so I've installed AWS CLI on my machine, and then you have to do this, run this command AWS configure. So once you run this command, it basically asks you to set your access key ID and your secret key and all of those, and that is stored inside this .aws folder. So I'm mapping that to my containers root .aws folder, so that credentials are available inside my container as well. And then I have a environment variables file. So we'll look at the environment variables file first. So inside the environment variables file, I have simply some settings. Accept EULA is a required one, so that is there. And then I'm setting up the password as Cold Fusion 123, but this will not be used because I'll be using the password that is defined inside the AWS Secrets Manager. We'll see how we are doing it. And then I'm installing certain modules and importing settings using this JSON file and so on. Right, so all of these should be available inside my this directory, my web root, this JSON file and this startup script. So if I do ls of my web root, it should have these files. So it has this JSON file and it has this startup script file. Now let's look at the Docker file. What is there inside this? So that Docker file is inside this directory. So I go to cd app and then I do a cat of Docker file. I'll just clear my screen and then do cat of Docker file. Yeah. So this is again coming from the beta build image that we have pushed to Docker Hub. So this is CF Next Beta latest. Since I need AWS, so I'm installing AWS CLI inside my container, and then I'm copying this MySQL. I need some other stuff for my application, so it's the same application that I used in demo one. So I'm copying these jar and then Tracker Pro app and all of that. And then I'm defining a script, which is this change password.sh script, and copying inside this directory. I'm giving execute permission to this script, and then I'm saying I need, this is the entry point of my Docker container, and I need to run this script and this is the parameter that I passed to this script. So this is my Docker file, in which I am just defining my base image, installing AWS CLI, and then I'm defining this startup script, which is change password.sh. So we'll look at this change password.sh script as well. So what it does, let me clear my screen and then you can see it clearly. Right. So, in this is a shell script. It has this method change, and inside this, I am getting the secret value from AWS using the AWS CLI. So, since I've already mounted the AWS credentials in my container, so it knows which AWS account to look to. So it goes to that account in this region, and then it's fetching the secret, which is of the name password. And then once I have that password, I am basically getting that password, and then uh, you trying to change the cold fusion password by replacing the value of that password in the password.properties files. Right, so this is how we change the password for cold fusion. I'm just using this password.properties file to change the password, and then I'm restarting my cold fusion, because after the password is changed, we need to restart cold fusion. So this is what is done to fetch secrets from AWS secret manager, and then change password of your cold fusion server. So we'll quickly bring up our cold fusion container. So again, this is not a Docker Swarm feature, so we do not need to run the Docker stack deploy command. We can use Docker Compose up. So I'll just say Docker Compose up -d, and the app is created. So if I do Docker PS, it should bring up the server on 8502. So CF has come up, and now I'm using the same password that I defined in the AWS Secret Manager. So I used Adobe at the rate 234. I'm putting that, and then CF has started. Not sure why packages are not getting installed. Could be some of my connectivity issues with the uh, basically to install the packages. It should be able to connect to this URL. So I think there's some connectivity issue with my system, and hence it did not install the package. But yeah, the password was set from the AWS Secrets Manager. Right, so that's how you could use AWS Secrets Manager with your Cold Fusion image. Now we'll quickly move to Docker configs. Now, Docker secrets was used to store sensitive information. For any non-sensitive data, like your application settings, any mappings, and in context of Cold Fusion, all the other environment variables, we could store all of these in Docker configs. Again, this is only available in Docker Swarm. These are also managed by the Swarm managers, and they basically manage the distribution of the configs to worker nodes. And so they, again, in the worker nodes, they are not available. They are not written to the disk of the worker nodes. They are only available in their in memory. Now, inside a container, they are available by default inside the root directory, and the name of the file is the name of the config. So, suppose your name of the config is your accept EULA, so that would be available inside the root directory as /accept EULA, and the name of the value of the config would be present inside that file. Now, how can you create Docker configs? Very simple. Similarly to Docker secret, you can create it using the Docker config create command, and and then define the name of the config, and then you create the Docker config. You can also create configs with the Docker service create command. So you can just say Docker service create and then minus minus config, which would help you to create configs. Or you can define them in your Docker compose file and choose to read the Docker config from any file which is present in your local file system. So this is how you create Docker configs. Now, in the context of Cold Fusion, all the environment variables except the ones that are stored as secrets, which is password, the add-ons password, and the session storage password, all the other environment variables can be stored in Docker configs. Now, you can create a config which has the same name as the configuration. So, suppose the environment variable that was used earlier was enable secure profile. So, you can have a config which is the same name. You can say enable secure profile and then store the value of that config, or you could club all your configs into a single config, and that name of that config is cf config. So, the inside the container, by default the configs would be available inside slash root directory and then the name of your config. But again, this is also configurable, so uh, you can define the path of your config using the environment variable cf config path, right? You can So when you are clubbing all your configurations and you're storing it inside a single file, which is the config's name is cf config, it can read from either a text file where you have a key value pair with like the same as you stored it in a variables.env file, or you could choose to store them in a json file. So both these are supported. Now, suppose if you have a particular setting, suppose the environment variable was language, and you've defined all the language inside in a config, which is the name of the setting, which is language, or you've defined that inside cf config, and also you've defined it in a environment variable. So, what would be the preference? What would be the value that will be set? So, if you have defined language as Japanese in the config, Docker config, which has the same name as the setting, which is language, that will be picked up. If you have both, if you have defined inside cf config and environment variable, the preference would be reading from cf config and the last would be environment variable. So that's the preference if you have set it in all the three places. So we'll see a quick example. We are using two configs here. We'll be using language and cf config both, and here we are reading cf config from a text file. We'll see the Docker Compose file and how we are bringing up the application in this demo. So let's quickly look at this demo. So I'm going inside this demo for directory. Yeah, so we look at Docker Compose file first. So the image again is CF Next Beta. I'm exposing it to 8503, and again the app/app directory is mounted to this my new web root, which is present inside this directory only. And then we have secrets and configs defined. So secrets again is the CF admin password will be read from the password. So again, for the preference, if you have defined password both as secret and environment variables, we'll be reading the value from Docker secrets. So the preference would be given to Docker secrets. So we'll be reading from there. Configs, we have defined two configs here, cf config, and then we have also defined a config language. So cf config is inside the container would be present in this location, and language would be present inside this location. For cf config, we are reading from this file, which is again present at the same directory. So we look at this txt file, and language we are seeing external true. So that means I've already defined this config. I might have created it either using docker service create command or using docker config create command. uh, Secrets, again I'm saying password, I'm using external true. So I'd already created this docker secret using the docker secret create command. Right, so let's look at cfconfig.txt. So I just say cat cfconfig.txt. Now let me clear my screen and then show it to you. Yeah, so I'm installing few modules, then defining this as my startup script. Language is English, profile is one, and then I'm saying that don't delete my startup script. Deployment type is three. So profile one means it's a production profile, three means it's a development deployment type, and then I'm defining allowed admin IP list as star. So the admin will be available, uh, would can be accessed from any IP, and then accept EULA as yes, since it's the mandate required environment, required setting for the cold fusion container to come up. Right, so this is my config which is defined inside cf config. Now if I say docker config ls, so I had defined multiple configs before in my environment, but you can see that I've already defined docker config language. So the value of this config is Japanese. Now I've defined language as a config as well, and I'm also defined the setting inside the cf config txt as well, which is English, and here it is Japanese. But CF, when it comes up, it will give preference to the language config and not to the CF config. So CF coming up should be the locale of the CF that would be coming up should be Japanese. Again, it's a I've already, the swarm is already started, and I think I also brought up the stack, so I don't need to say docker stack deploy, it should be already up. uh, so I can just see docker ps, and I think it should be up. It The cf should be available on 8503. If it's not available, I can start it. I think it's not available, so I'll start it. So I say docker stack deploy minus c and the file of the name of the compose file, and then I say cf apps with cf config. Okay. Yeah, so I think it created the config. It's bringing up the cf server. So I say docker logs 8aa. Yeah. So yeah, I think it'll bring up the cf server in some time. It should have brought it up. Let's look at. Still, I think cf server is coming up. Okay. Yeah. Yeah, I think you can see that the locale has changed to Japanese, and CF should be coming up in Japanese locale. Yeah. Again, this password was read from the Docker secret, so I'm entering the password as Adobe at the rate 234. Yeah, so even though the language was defined as English in CF config, it took Japanese locale because that was defined in the config named language. Yeah, so we look at another demo which where we are reading config from config.json, right? So let's quickly look at demo 5. So we look at the Docker Compose file first. For the interest of time, I first thought I'll bring up the Redis and the add-on server as well along with the Cold Fusion, but then it was taking some time for things to come up. So I've removed both those services. I only have Cold Fusion service currently. So here again, I've defined some of the deploy condition as replicas as 2 and whatever I'm using some of the scaling features of Docker Swarm. And then I've defined secrets as password. So again, the Cold Fusion password will be set using the Docker secrets. And configs, I'm defining only one config here, which is the cf config, and that is being read from config.json file. So we'll see what this config.json file is. Yeah, so again, it has the required environment variable, which was accept EULA, and then it defines all of these, where I'm defining the startup script, where to import the settings for CF from this JSON file, and defining deployment type profile, installing these modules, and so on. Okay, so I'll just I've already I don't think I've brought up the stack, so I'll just say docker stack deploy, and I'll give some name. Bringing up the server. Okay, I think it's already up, so that is why it's saying it's already in use. So I'll just see 8505 it's up or not. Yeah. So again, the password should be read from Docker secrets. Okay. Somehow in this, I think I had brought this up earlier, and that time my packages were getting installed. So I think here you can see all those packages that were mentioned in that config file. So if you see in the config JSON, all these packages had to be installed. So I think all of these would be installed in my CF server. Yeah, so these got installed along with all other dependency modules that had to be installed. And there's one schedule task also created, which has been imported using that CF setup JSON file. And I have some settings for mail server as well. So all those have been added here. Great. So we'll move on to the next demo. With this release, we're also bringing up the CCS image. So it's not a separate image since we have not actually isolated the CCS server from the CF server. So it's part of the CF Cold Fusion image only. But before we get into how can we bring up the CCS image, I just wanted to give a brief introduction on what CCS is. So CCS is basically the central configuration server where you could, add clients to this server. So once you bring up the CCS server, you can define all the CF clients and add those nodes to CCS server. And once the nodes are added to CCS server, if any setting is changed in any one of the instance, the same setting gets applied to all the other nodes which are part of the CCS server. So it basically manages your configuration centrally. uh, you can have multiple groups of CF servers as well, so you can group your state servers and define a particular settings for your state server, and you can have a group of production servers, and all of those can be managed. I think we have a detailed presentation which is available, I think, on YouTube as well. You can check for central configuration server. For the interest of time, it's just I'm just letting you know that CCS server, we have a CCS server that comes along with CF server, and you can add CF clients to those CCS server. And if you change any setting from one of the client nodes, that is reflected in all other CF client nodes. So, to bring up a CCS server along with your CF server, you just need two settings. So, there's the first one is start CCS. So, if you say start CCS as true and define that setting either in your Docker config or your environment variable, CCS server will be up and running along with the ColdFusion server on port 7071. And then you can define, you can also add nodes to your CCS server while you're bringing up the CCS server. So you can define those nodes using this setting, CCS nodes. So you can again define this CCS nodes either with your in your environment variables or on Docker configs. So we'll quickly see a demo of the same. So I have a config.json where we define both these variables, and then a Docker compose, and then finally I'll bring up the application on the stack using this Docker stack deploy command. So we'll go to that demo. We'll look at, just clear my screen. Yeah, so you can see that I have secrets defined in configs, and configs are defined in this cf config file, and they are not stored in a the regular config path. They are not stored in the default path, so I have to define a environment variable to help the ColdFusion container while it comes up to read this config. So I have defined it inside, I think, variables.env file, and configs are defined inside the config.json file. So we look at both these files. Yeah. So I think rest of them are same as the earlier examples. The other two are start CCS as true, and then we have defined a CCS node as well. Okay, so this node is already up and running. I can show you this node. So if you log into your CF admin and then go to your CCS page under server settings, you can see your client section. So this is your client. So the CF server would be the client for your CCS server. So inside under the client section, you can see a secret key, right? So this is used to register the node with the CCS server, right? So I'll be using this key while I'm registering the node with the CCS server. So if you can see in my config.json file, I'm using the same key, and this is my host and port for host and port for the CF server. Okay, and I'm saying start CCS as true, so that means the CCS server will be up in this container. uh, and I'll also show you my variables.env file. So I only have this environment variable cf config path. So since cf config is not stored in the default path, it's being stored in some other location. So I have to define where the qualification container should be reading the cf config from. So I'm defining it using this environment variable cf config path, which is and the path is opt config. Okay, so I'll quickly bring up the stack. Again, I'm using secrets and configs, so it's I'll have to use Docker Swarm feature. I'll use Docker Compose YML, and then I'll say CF app with CCS. Okay, so it's already present, so I'll just use something else. Okay, and I think I already brought that stack up. So it says 8506 is already in use. So since I've already brought the stack, let's look at the CF admin. It should be available under 8506 port. So again, it's using Docker secrets. So the password should be adobe@234. Yep. So now if I go on the CCS page, so if in this admin under 8600, you cannot see the server section because CCS server is not up and running for this CF instance. In this CF instance, CCS server is already up and running. So you can see the CCS server section, and along with that I also added that node, which is this node 8600, and then this was the key that was used to add the node. Right. Yeah, so that's all I had with the demo. I'll share all the demo files with you guys, and if you have any question, do let me know.
Awesome, amazing. Thank you so much, Suchika. That was a lot of stuff. So you guys probably will want to do.
I cannot hear you, Mark. Is that only me, or others can also not hear him?
Really? You should
Yeah,
be able.
now I
Can
can
everyone
hear.
else hear me?
Now I can hear you. Yeah.
Yes, and of course they're asking in the chat instead of the Q&A because nobody listens to me. Okay, Dave Merrill, what CF version first had the CCS server, and is it enterprise only? So 2023 had CCS, and I believe it's enterprise only. Is that right, Suchika?
No, it's not. It's
It's not okay.
available as well. Yeah. Yes.
Charlie.
We
Go
did
ahead.
some improvement with the startup container startup. So earlier we were using admin APIs to configure all those settings. So we've moved to CF setup so that we do not have to restart CF server multiple times. There are still few settings that need CF to be started, like the CCS server. The CF has to be already started for that. So I think only two or three settings need two times restart for safe. Others all uh, do not need the restart to happen twice.
Very nice, very nice. Rodney says lost audio again. Rodney, are you able to hear us? Hopefully. Awesome, perfect. Yeah. Charlie's talking about how much faster the images are, and they absolutely are super fast. just so I have people putting in some info, I brought up a few things that we'd love to get more information on. Some poll questions, if you wouldn't mind giving us some feedback, that would be rad while we're answering questions. Also, very important, tomorrow we have another webinar. It's the last one, and for once it's being led by me, and it is all Q&A, all of it. So if you have questions, comments, concerns, things like that about any of the webinars, including today's, you can pre-send those over to me, and I'll have a link in a bunch of different locations to send that to, and we will have engineers on site answering questions for like an hour tomorrow, 9 a.m. Pacific, same CF place, same time. Charlie is typing like crazy. Charlie, I can hardly keep up. God, how do you type that fast? Okay, discussions of the addition of CCS support Docker images is covered in the beta docs. Yep. Discussed. Yeah. It was in the Alpha 1 version of the docs. I see. Yeah, you got to look up. Yeah, that's true. That's true, Charlie. You do have to look at all three docs. I think we're talking about maybe combining them all, but it's going to be a lot. So we'll see. All right. Anybody else with questions for Suchika while we have her here? She's right there. Very good. All right. So we're a bit over time. So I'm just going to go ahead and say thank you so much for to Suchika for doing this. There was a lot of info here. This is all going to be recorded, so I'm sure all of you will have to go back through. There's a ton of really great code samples. Suchika will be sharing some of these as well. Maybe we can put them up on the beta site, maybe in the forums. I'm not sure where, but we'll find a place. Maybe the new public Git repo for Adobe Cold Fusion. Maybe we'll do that. So thank you all for coming as well and for doing the polls for us. And we'll see you all tomorrow morning at 9 a.m. Pacific. I'm going to go ahead and stop. I'm going to stop the recording, and we'll be back in just 1 second.